Hi, I'm Mr. eTutor, your mystery tutor here at mysterytutor.com, and welcome to video module 10-1. In this module, I'd like to discuss some bad SAT advice that you hear all over the place, and give you the good SAT advice instead. These items are in no particular order, just things I happen to see around. The first item that you hear all over the place is that you need an excellent calculator for math questions. This is simply not true. In fact, as I demonstrate repeatedly in the math modules on this website, you can answer every real SAT question in less than 30 seconds without a calculator. It's just a fact. Give it a shot. You'll see that I'm right. Calculators do not necessarily help anyone on the SAT. Now, I'm not recommending that you don't have one. If you'd like to have one, go ahead and have it. If you think it helps you psychologically, or if you prefer not to do basic math in your head, that's totally fine. The problem is that I don't want you to look at each math question as an opportunity to use a calculator. Most of the math questions, particularly many of the difficult questions, simply cannot use a calculator. There's no way to do it. There aren't even numbers for many of the questions. So remember, the SAT math test is not a calculator test. In fact, it's not even really a math test. It's all about properties and definitions and basic concepts. If it seems hard to use your calculator on there, it's not because you need a better calculator or because you don't understand the math. It's because a calculator simply can't be used on the types of questions that appear on the SAT in many cases. The second general piece of bad advice that people seem to give is that you should try to memorize everything related to the test. This means memorizing vocabulary, memorizing formulas, memorizing grammar, memorizing examples from novels to use in your essay, memorizing everything. Even though this is horrible advice, I think in many cases it's coming from a good place. On a lot of tests, the way to do well really is to memorize everything you possibly can. But on the SAT, this doesn't work at all. And what usually happens is that students who try to memorize their way through the SAT go ahead and take it and find out that they don't do very well. Instead of concluding that memorizing must be a bad idea, they conclude that they must not have memorized nearly enough, and they go back and try to memorize even more stuff. I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody memorize 100 vocabulary words, realize it did no good whatsoever, and then go back and memorize 5,000. It isn't that you memorized the wrong things. It's that there's very, very little to memorize when it comes to the SAT. The SAT is more of a performance, just like a performance in sports or an artistic performance. It's all about doing the right thing at the right time, having a plan and sticking to it, understanding exactly what's going to happen, and reacting to it when it does happen. That's what the SAT is about, and no amount of memorization is going to get you there. If you'd like to study the right way, rather than memorize things, spend some time watching the other video modules on this site. A third type of bad advice that I'd like to address calls for psychoanalyzing the test in one way or another. The people who give this advice generally think that we can read the minds of the people who create the SAT and know which answer choices they're going to say are correct, even without necessarily reading the rest of the question. For example, I've seen several articles in which someone explains that you can answer reading comprehension questions without even reading the passage or the question, just by reading the multiple choice answer choices and choosing the least offensive, most innocuous answer choice. This is complete garbage advice. There are many questions in this book, the official SAT study guide by the College Board, that show that this approach is not going to work. There is no way to psychoanalyze the SAT, to think about it in terms of social forces, or ethnicity, or anything along those lines. And in fact, there's no need to do any of those things. If you look around on this site, you'll see it's very easy to take the questions apart systematically using ways that actually work. There's no reason to try to say, well, the SAT is racist or it's biased in favor of upper-class families, so the answer choices that are biased in favor of upper-class families are going to be correct. For one thing, like I said, that's just not true. You can read the test yourself and find that out. For another thing, there are easier ways to answer questions correctly than having to think along those lines. So please, don't try to psychoanalyze the test. Instead, look around at the videos on this site and learn to beat it easily, on its own terms. It's much faster and much more satisfying. These are just a few of the bad pieces of SAT advice that are out there, so I'd like to close by calling your attention to an idea we've discussed in an earlier video. Whenever you receive any piece of SAT advice, including the SAT advice on this site, make sure you put it to the test. Don't just believe it because you've heard it from someone who you think is trustworthy. Get out your copy of the official SAT study guide by the College Board, again, the only printed copy of real SAT questions, and see if the advice you're hearing is actually true. If it is true, then great, follow it. If it's not true, and most of it will not be true. Go ahead and discard it. Thanks very much for watching this. Remember, don't believe everything you hear, because the test really is easier than you think.